The current education system in most states, particularly in the US, creates a segregation education landscape. Kids of color whose schools are funded by local council taxes are chronically underfunded and failing, while rich white kids' schools prosper because of the vast wealth of their neighborhoods. On side proposition today, we stand behind the original principle of Brown versus Board that every single child should have access to a good education, and to make this happen through these voucher systems. What is our mechanism today? We suggest that vouchers will be given to all parents. They can be used in private schools or public schools, and this also includes private religious schools. We stand on the side that as long as an institution has been centrally licensed as a school, we're happy for the vouchers to be used there. We're going to talk about three main things today. First of all, how this school voucher system is better for individual children. Second of all, how it creates a better educational system as a whole. And third of all, how the current system fosters racial tensions. Moving on to the first level today, which is about the individual children. Here we have two levels of analysis. First of all, state schools are chronically underfunded and failing. State schools in most countries in the status quo are funded by council taxes. White neighborhoods, due to the legacy of slavery and segregation, receive vastly more funds than people of colors at school. We believe that this is very problematic because due to the fact that one school is actually allocated on the basis of a zip code. This means that black and brown kids and kids from other minorities cannot go to schools which receive vastly more funding, such as white schools. This is very, very bad due to three reasons. First of all, we believe that this causes for less teachers that are less good. This is very important because these kids cannot receive the same level of education when their teachers do not have the same level of education as other teachers. Second of all, this results in large class sizes, which makes it harder to keep discipline in class. And third of all, this results in lack of educational materials such as books, such as microscopes, and such as computers and facilities, labs, study spaces, which makes it harder to teach certain subjects such as, for example, chemistry or biology. All of this leads to poor kids and kids from minorities dropping out of high school. This often leads to chronic unemployment and tendency to crime, which is extremely problematic in the case of minority children because it additionally deprives them of the chance to have an equal chance in life. Then this also results in teenage pregnancies and other outcomes, which makes it much harder for these kids to actually have a decent future. Why does this change on our side of the house? This changes as now many more kids can go to school in other districts which have more funds, such as other public schools, or they can choose to give a little bit more money and go to private schools at a much lower cost. And this is very, very important because we're actively giving these kids the chance to actually perform better and to have a decent life. A second level of analysis here. Children often learn better in an environment where they feel comfortable. Why isn't this so in the status quo? Simply because many children do not feel comfortable due to several reasons. One, they might be quite religious and want to study things like the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah. And this is very important for these kids because not studying these things actually takes away a part of their education. Second of all, they might be from minority religion or ethnicity and going to a public schools which is majority populated. And this, again, is very problematic. Why? Because these children often face verbal and physical abuse. For example, Muslim kids in the US have particular high rates of experiencing bullying rather than other kids, with more than 50% actually experiencing this bullying. This might cause depression in these kids, and this drain for education as a whole, leading to higher dropout rates, which is something we want to prevent on our side of the house. The status quo furthermore forces kids into schools where most teachers are not of their own race or ethnicity. This is problematic once again, since white teachers tend to underestimate black kids more and more and tend to give them harder punishment if they misbehave because of their internal bias. This is once again problematic. Why? Because simply those kids are not given the same chance. Moving on to our second point, which is about why it's better for the educational system as a whole. We believe that here we have again two levels of analysis. First of all, this creates more competition between schools. Well, public schools in the status quo are currently underperforming as they have no incentive to actually improve. Why is that so? Because in the status quo, they receive a set amount of money every year because they know that they'll get similar amount of kids every year due to the fact that one, they get the same kids from the zip code, and two, they enroll kids only based on that, and they should not actually have the incentive to improve. Then therefore, even if they're well intentioned, some schools can get complacent and blame bad results only on lack of funding. This changes on our side of the house. How? Because when there is competition for every child, schools will have to try and become more appealing. This might look like, for example, organizing fundraising and crowdfunding campaigns in order to buy better books that are not present in other schools, or actually improving teaching by having teachers either stay after class and explain things if needed, or change their methods if they're ineffective, or try out new revolutionary techniques that might push the school to a higher degree in the rankings. And furthermore, it might allow for these schools to actually raise standards for discipline and introduce anti-bullying policies in order to attract children that have experienced such in the past. All of this on our side of the house leads to better educational outcomes and less high school dropouts, which will not happen on their side of the house. Second level of analysis here, how public schools will start to attract enough students to be good, and even though some public schools will go to private and religious schools, which we believe will be a major part of the opposition's case. Private schools will still be expensive on our side of the house, as the set amount that the state pays to a state school is lower, and it will not be enough to actually cover the entire tuition of the private schools. This means that many children will still choose to remain in these public schools. This is not due to the reason that they don't have money. This might be due to other factors also. Such factors might be transportation costs, safety, or the fact that this child might have connections and friends there. And we believe that on our side of the house, public schools will continue to actually be present, and we will not be failing public schools actively. This means that public schools will not close down. If they will simply have to compete if they want to thrive. Public schools in Indiana, in the US, for example, are still thriving, even though there has been a voucher program introduced there, simply because they compete with each other and they try to outrank each other much, much more. We on side government today stand for a world where children's future are not determined by the complacency of their local school. And because we want to give the most vulnerable kids a chance to empower themselves through education, we're proud to propose today.